Alright, welcome to our very first world history lecture video. Alright, the plan is to keep these videos short and sweet, around 15 minutes or less. That way your attention span won't have to worry about running out. Now let's get started on today's lesson. Alright, civilizations are going to arise on the Fertile Crescent. On the Fertile Crescent is this area here on the map. Alright, this is referred to as Mesopotamia, which is a Greek word which means land between two rivers. And the two rivers that were featured here are the Tigris and the Euphrates. Okay? Many civilizations, many first cities were started on this very fertile crescent. Okay? So, normally I would start, if we were in class, I would start off with a question of why is it important for people, especially farmers, to settle near rivers and streams? Well, farmers need their villages near water because they need it for the crops. It's pretty simple, right? Alright, so Mesopotamia, I already said this before, but this is the region between the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. One of the first villages to emerge here is called Sumer. Alright, they were called the Sumerians, and they were a collection of cities. Okay, they were not unified. Alright, Sumer is not a city nor is it a country. Alright, it's a collection of cities with a shared way of life. They share a common culture. Okay, historians believe that Hammurrabians built the world's first civilization. Okay, there are actually evidence to show that in the Indus Valley, in India, actually go back even farther. But I feel like what makes this is more unique in a traditional sense. I'll explain that later. So what do we define the term civilization? Well, there are 5 traits that are essential for a civilization, and you need to know these 5 traits. One is the growth of cities, okay? And I'm not just talking about population. You got to have a center of trade in that area. You got to have farmers, merchants, traders that bring goods to markets in the cities. You have specialized workers, also known as artisans, who make goods by hand. These are skilled in certain jobs, like a blacksmith, maybe a silversmith, maybe someone who makes bronze weapons during this time. And see, farmers are able to produce more than what was needed for themselves, so they would have a surplus of crops and were able to trade their goods for a different good or service. And we call this subsistence farming. Or I should say that's an end to subsistence farming, where they would only grow for themselves. Okay? You gotta have record keeping and writing. Okay? People gotta be able to record data. Merchants have to keep track of debts and payments. The Sumerians would write on what's called cuneiform. Alright, this is a system of writing that's typically written on wedge-shaped symbols. Okay? Cuneiform tablet. Okay, this is imprints of the signs called cuneiform were made by pressing a wedge-shaped stylus into wet clay. Alright, this here. And that is cuneiform. Alright, here's what a tool would look like to carve it out. And here is a translation table to what the difference between our lettering system and the cuneiform writing. Alright, continuing where we left off. You need advanced technology in a civilization. I'm not talking about computers. Alright? We're talking about general things like creating the wheel, the plow, the first sailboats. Okay? Creating bronze, which is what happens when you mix copper and tin. And of course, complex institutions. You got to have an organizational system to run a city. All right. So, for example, a government. All right, having a leader in charge is going to be important in running a complex institution. All right. But there are also disadvantages to living on the Fertile Crescent. You have water problems, unpredictability of floods, and water dries up quickly. But we create solutions to that. And the solution to this is the Sumerians would create irrigation ditches. Defense problems. You have a very flat land. There's no natural defensive barriers to prevent raids by nomads. Okay? And so the Sumerians would build city walls with mud bricks to discourage raids. You have limited natural resources. So a lack of resources was to create tools, stone, wood, metal. And so they would create an extensive trade network with their surrounding people to get the resources they needed. Okay? Be sure to pause this while you're writing down if you need to. And we see these solutions still being used today. Irrigation ditches are still used as a way of getting water to crops. Mud brick homes are still being built today in the Middle East because of the lack of timber. Alright, the Sumerians are polytheists. What this means is they believe in many different gods. Alright, they believe that their gods were a lot like them, except they were immortal and all-powerful. Okay? We have Anu, the god of heaven. Enlil, the god of clouds and air. Ea, or I think that's right, god of water and floods. They also believe in an afterlife. They believe that their souls went to the land of no return, a gloomy place that is between the earth's crust and the ancient sea. Alright, so who ruled Sumer? We have priests and kings. The priests would have power because they knew how to please the gods and keep the city safe. Sumerians began by choosing a strong warrior to lead them into battle, and they eventually became kings. And over time, these kings became a hereditary position, okay, where their sons would be groomed to become the next king. Alright, so here are the social classes in Sumer. At the top, you have the priests and kings. Next, we have the wealthy merchants, followed by the artisans, or that might actually be the correct way to say it. Artisans and farmers, and then at the bottom were the slaves. And then over time, they could earn their freedom by working for their masters day and night, hoping one day to increase their social status. Women actually had more rights during this time than many women in later civilizations. Sumer's downfall. So for 1,000 years, from 3000 to 2000 BC, the city-states of Sumer are going to be at war with one another. Okay? This weakened the city-states so much that it allowed they could no longer ward off attacks from greater threats. Okay? In 2000 BC, nomadic raiders are going to sweep through the city of leaving it in ruins, thus ending the last of the great city-states of Sumer. Okay? This here is a 1930 aerial photograph of the ziggurat at by Leonard Woolley. Here's another picture after they partially restored it. And then this is a drawing of what the original ziggurat looked like. Now, if you don't know what a ziggurat is a step pyramid, typically, for worship of some kind. Alright, and they built them all over the world, which is unique. Even in North and South America, the ancient Native Americans built them there. They also built them in Egypt, of course, but they were a little different. They were actual pyramids. A major turning point in history was the creation of Hammurabi's Code. In around 2000 BC, nomadic warriors known as the Amorites invaded Mesopotamia. They established Babylon as their capital city, and Hammurabi is going to become a powerful, influential king of the Amorites. Alright, Babylon's civilization is now becoming so complex that they have to write written laws to resolve disputes. And this became what was known as Hammurabi's Code, his collection of laws. Some of these are things you've heard of. This is actually a carving. Here's Hammurabi here, and this is a carving of the sun god Shamash giving the laws to Hammurabi. The purpose of Hammurabi's Code is to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and evil, and to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak, to enlighten the land, and to further the welfare of the people. Okay? There are 282 specific laws. 88 laws deal with marriage, family, and property. And there are 3 fundamental principles. One is called the principle of retaliation to punish crimes, eye for an eye. Number two, principle of punishment. Double standards exist between social classes. And third and final, the principle that the government had a responsibility for what occurred in society. Okay? Alright, so that's kind of the end of our first part. Let's talk about other groups of people that are going to make a difference. Alright, moving on a few hundred years later, we have a group of people known as the Phoenicians are going to become powerful traders in the Mediterranean Sea. And 300 Phoenician cities will sprout up around the Mediterranean Sea, specifically Africa. They were highly prized because of the purple dye that the Phoenicians were known for. They extracted it from a gland of what was called of a snail, and each snail yielded only a drop of yellow liquid, which darkened on exposure to light. This process requires slow. It takes about 2 weeks, and would use up to 60,000 snails are needed for each pound of dye. It's a lot of snails. But the greatest Phoenician contribution happened around 900 BC, and that is when they created a writing system with 22 symbols, all right, versus 600 symbols used in cuneiform, and that is the alphabet. And our modern English language can trace its roots back to the Phoenician alphabet. Notice the similar letters and shapes that you see here. Okay. Another important group in the Fertile Crescent are the Jews, or Hebrews, as they were called before, for a long time. And that is the idea of monotheism, okay? A person who worships one God. The Jews and Hebrews were one of the smallest groups in the ancient Fertile Crescent, but they have one of the greatest influences on all of history, specifically the Bible, okay? The Torah. Not to mention the laws that were made by Moses and the Ten Commandments are have a high emphasis on justice and morality, and how and an individual relationship with God was one of the things that set Judaism apart from other religions of the day. All right, and these religious traditions have last even today. Probably their three most famous kings are Saul, David, and Solomon, and their kingdom was called Israel. Okay. All right, we're going to stop there for today. I appreciate you for listening, and as always, stay classy.